regarding, so you heard two different kinds of messages. One, know what you want to do, and B, don't know what to do, but I really think this course is cool. But rising above all of that, I think, and now I will talk about Oxford a little bit. There are courses in British institutions that are thematically focused. So instead of saying, let me get a PhD in sociology, there's actually a DPhil program in Oxford called Migration and Human Security. You could get an MPhil and then move on to the DPhil. There's also a program in social legal studies. There's one program in social change and law. If you actually study one of these pages, you will see that it might fit with some of the things that you're already thinking about. And I find, having spent some time in British education because of my work now as someone as director, that it's incredibly useful to start thinking about problems rather than disciplines. Because there are three things that I encountered in my own life, and now of course, hindsight is 20/20. It's one thing to find a university to say, second challenge to find the right kind of advisor, but perhaps the most important thing is to find the right problem to work.
Well, you started to speak about differences in your program, so there wasn't something in the United States that was the equivalent. And I'd like to go a little more in depth into that. So what are some differences you notice between universities in the United Kingdom and the United States? This could be structure, this could be course content, this could be even student life, research atmosphere, etc. Thank you.
I'll say something to start with. Last week I was in Exeter in England and talking to some of our students there. And I told them that I was going to be doing this event today and said, you've been here a month. What are your observations on what's different about studying in the UK? And I got a lot of information. They were full of ideas and full of thoughts about the distinctions. And I'll just give you a couple of examples to give you a flavor. These folks can fill in more details from their own personal experience. One young man who's a pre-med told me that he's in a biology class, and that first of all, there are no exams until the very end. And the exam that he's going to take in his biology class, an upper division biology class, is not going to be the typical multiple choice test that he's accustomed to, but it's going to be an essay test in biology. And this is striking some terror into him at this moment because he has no idea how he'll write an essay in biology. But he recognized this. I didn't have to say this for him. He recognized that that's a very important keyhole through which to see a very fundamental difference in the way in which knowledge is organized in British University courses, a different way of conceiving the relationship among different parts of different bits of information. He's going to have to tell a story about biology, not just memorize details, not just memorize discrete facts, but he's going to have to, at the end, take a large body of information and very sophisticated information and create a narrative around it, connect the dots, connect all the pieces in a coherent whole, which he had never been asked to do in an American biology class. So, as I say, it was striking some fear into him, but it was also, he understood that this was going to challenge him and going to help him see relationships among different areas of the coursework that he might not have been able to discern because he was going to have to focus on that. He also told me that the course had no particular professor. There was a professor of record, but people kept dropping in and out. People kept coming in and giving lectures on different aspects of the course, different areas of research that they were focused on. And then next week, somebody else would come in and talk about some other aspect of the course from their own particular research passion, point of view. And that there was a textbook, but nobody ever mentioned the textbook. And clearly he was understanding already that in relation to the first point I made, he was going to be asked to put these things together. It was up to him to connect the dots, to understand the relationship among all the different speakers who were coming in, to relate it to the textbook without being told, here's how the lecture relates to the textbook, and so forth. So he was seeing that one fundamental difference is the emphasis on individual responsibility for helping to shape the body of knowledge that you're getting in class, and a different way of conceiving and organizing knowledge in these classes. So I don't know if that resonates with your experience or not.
Absolutely, yeah. So, like Dean Adams said, at the end of the 2 semesters was the first time we sat down and had an exam. And it was a written 3-hour block of time where we just had to sit down, and it was it was incredible because it did, that kind of exam forces you to synthesize all the material and not just kind of spit out what you've learned. We had to reference, our insight, all of these different citations that you couldn't just, look up in a book. You had to like do the original research yourself. And so you end up with a more complete mastery of the material once you've been forced to kind of, and I say forced because I didn't enjoy it while it was happening, but after the exam I was like, yeah, wow, I actually know a lot about conservation. And to riff off of what Dr. Basu was saying, again, they weren't based off of just the classes we had taken, the exams were based on themes. So there were 3 themes of the course that kind of transcended the different classes we actually sat in on a day-to-day basis, and it was up to us to kind of synthesize everything that we were learning from each classes, our own readings, our own conversations with our peers, and to kind of put it all together and pass the exam. Something else that was really unique in the UK, and I'm sure it's like they said other universities, but particularly Oxford, was just how international the community was, and how small the graduate programs can be. There were 25 people who were also reading in my master's, which was just, you got to know everyone that you were sitting in classes with. And there were 15 different countries that were represented by those 25 people. So we really got this incredible perspective, or 15 different perspectives, and intimately, because there were only 25 of us. So it's great.
Yeah, I think things have changed a little bit since I just sent a student into the program that I took. I was in the tutorial system, which means I landed, I had no idea what I was doing. It was extremely medieval. It was sort of just I guess maybe a test for me to figure out where I was supposed to be. I figured out who I was supposed to contact, and, really out to sea for those first few weeks. And then I would see a tutor. So I had one of the senior lecturers in my field. They'd give me a reading list, quite extensive, and they'd say, "See you next week." So you go, you read everything, you write a paper, an essay, come and read in front of the tutor, and then they would, in a very English way, destroy you. So it was
Very polite.
yeah, very polite, really destroy you. And that was a sort of taught portion. There were also classes that we participated in, but they were always secondary to the tutorials. So I had 3 specialist subjects over the 3 terms, and then exams at the end for my taught master's portion. And the system is obviously that's quite different. It's a very intensive experience, very hands-on, very. Each term I had a different tutor, but so lifelong relationships actually with those tutors, and they were very formative, obviously, in my work today. So
those are still very present in the undergraduate programs. Not so much the graduate programs anymore, but as a graduate student, I had friends that they were then the tutors for the undergrads, and they would sit one-on-one here. We really are here to one-on-one tutoring. So it's a very valuable experience, which they can afford at a really great school because they can afford to have so many few students and a lot of money, right? So in my graduate program, as I said, it was a research master's, which meant that at the end of it, well, I guess there was also not very much instruction. So I kind of, at the very beginning, before the course started, I had a goal in mind. I sat down with my advisor and we said, we're going to do this. And that was it. So the rest of the semesters, I kind of had to figure out how to do it. Every once in a while we would meet, but my advisor was a very high-profile guy, so I rarely saw him. He was in a different country every other week, so I felt more like I was an employee than a student. But at the end of it, I had to defend my dissertation, so I sat down in the room for 2 hours and had to defend my thesis and had to say why do I believe my results and why is this important, like to put everything in a broader context. It's a bit different from the master's, but also in a lot of ways the same. But also not being too, stepping down a little bit from the seriousness, I think, in student life, at least. So when we were talking about before the colleges, that was a very different experience, but very specific to Oxbridge and Durham, but that was really unique in the sense that, it felt like a different world. It felt like we were in Harry Potter. The student body, I think it's a fact, the students specialized a lot earlier on. So after during their equivalent in high school, in their high school, they take these A levels and they know what they're going to do going into undergrad, so they don't do as many general education requirements as we do usually. And that puts them in a position so that once they're in the graduate program, they're ready to go, they hit the ground running. Whereas I felt I was a bit behind some people because I hadn't had their equivalent graduate classes they took as undergrads, they've kind of already done it. So that's a big difference, I think. And also funding. So as an international student, if you're coming from the US, I think it's also harder to get, if you can get accepted into a program, I think, I don't want to say easily, but relatively, they tend to accept you, but not really with the promise of money. If you can come if you bring money. So that's why I had to go and just apply for my fellowships, of course, but maybe Dr. Russell can speak more about that. But yeah, so as for here, if you go to grad school in the U.S., I think at least in STEM, you're physically provided for. You're not supposed to have a job besides that because they want you focusing on your studies. So you do have to come with your own money if you want to study these places.
But to Dean Adams's point, I think the nature of discourse is the foundation of everything people do in England. So you do write a lot, which is one thing, and you also speak a lot. And there are places where students come together and talk to each other in meaningful ways.